8b, we're going to look at solving polynomial equations. And everything that I'm going to do in this video, you have seen before in this class. It is all factoring and solving by factoring. So, factoring reminder, okay? First step in any factoring problem is always GCF. So if I look at this, they all have an x in common. So I'm going to factor out an x, and I would be left with x squared minus 2x minus 15. And then this that is inside of the parentheses, I need to check whether or not that can be factored further. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to negative 15 and add to negative 2. I can use 5 and 3, and I'm going to make the 5 negative. That would multiply to negative 15, add to negative 2. So I still have this x outside, and then I also have x minus 5 and x plus 3 as factors. Okay, so nothing new there. Okay, and then solving polynomials, it's going to be the same as solving quadratics back in Unit 4. Okay, we set the equation equal to 0. We're going to factor. Just make sure that you look for that GCF first. Okay, and then sometimes we'll have to factor. Sometimes we'll have to use your quadratic formula. Okay, and at the end we set everything equal to 0 and solve it. So first thing I need to do is make this equation equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract 3x on both sides. So now I have 2x cubed minus 5x squared minus 3x equals 0. First step is a GCF. Do they all have a GCF? Well, they all have an x in common. So I'm going to factor that out. And now I have 2x squared minus 5x minus 3, and that is equal to 0. So let's double check and see if this can be factored. Remember that when there's a number in front, we have to multiply that by what's at the end. So I'm looking for numbers that would multiply to negative 6 and add to negative 5. Okay, I can do that. I can do negative 6 and positive 1. So I still have this x outside. And then on the inside, I have 2x squared, and then I'm going to write my two factors. So minus 6x plus 1x, and then copy down that minus 3. So those four terms in the middle, I'm going to factor by grouping. This x is just going to hang out outside the whole time. All right, so in here, let me get a different color so you can see what we're doing. Okay, I'm looking for the GCF of this group, so that would be 2x, and would leave me with x minus 3. And then the GCF of this group right here is just 1, and that leaves me with x minus 3, and this is all equal to 0. So now I have, let me move this down a little bit so you guys can see better. Okay, I have my x still hanging out there outside. My common factor here, my inside is x minus 3, and then my outside is 2x plus 1. All of that is equal to 0, and so now I'm going to have three different solutions because I have three factors. So I have x equals 0, x minus 3 equals 0, and 2x plus 1 equals 0. All right, this one is already solved, so that's one solution. Here I'm going to add 3 to both sides, and I get x equals 3. All right, here I would subtract 1, so I would have 2x equals negative 1, and then divide by 2, so x is equal to negative 1/2. So those are my three separate solutions to this. Okay, so what I want you to do is pause here and try number 3 on your own, and then come back and I'll have it worked out for you to check. Alright, there's your answer for example 3. It can't be factored, so you have to use quadratic formula. If you have any questions about that, put a star by it so you can ask me about it in class. Alright, remember the last way that we learned to factor? It was by sum or difference of cubes. So if both of these are perfect cubes, which they are, so the cube root of x cubed is x, and the cube root of 1 is 1. And then remember, SOAP was the acronym for how we need to line things up. So this is a subtraction one, so I'm going to use this one. So it's the same sign, so x minus 1. And then a squared plus AB, so 1 times x is just x, and then always positive at the end, and 1 squared is just positive 1. So that would be factored. But then, since this is asking for a solution, the only way I can solve this part I can just set equal to 0. So x minus 1 equals 0. One of my solutions is going to be x equals 1. For this part, since it can't be factored further, you have to use quadratic formula. So x is going to be equal to -1 plus or minus the square root of 1 squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a, and then we need to solve that. Okay, and there are my other two solutions after I finish solving that quadratic. Okay, then one last thing is working backwards given the zeros or the roots to come up with the equation. So we did this with quadratics, and now we're just adding in maybe an extra 0 or 2 for cubic, quartic, quintic polynomials. So it's the same thing. The factors are always the opposites of the zeros. So if I have a 0 at -2, then I have x plus 2 as a factor. If I have a 0 at positive 2, then I have x minus 2 as a factor. And if I have a 0 at positive 3, I have x minus 3 as a factor. And we're going to multiply this out and then simplify. So I'm going to FOIL these two first. Okay, so x squared times, or x times x would give me x squared. X times -2 is -2x. 2 times x is positive 2x. And then 2 times -2 is -4. I can simplify and combine these like terms. They actually cancel each other out. So now I have x squared minus 4 times x minus 3. So I'm going to FOIL again. All right, x squared times x is x cubed. X squared times -3 is -3x squared. -4 times x is -4x. -4 times -3 is positive 12. There's no like terms there, so that would be the polynomial in standard form that has those zeros. All right. This one, so remember it's always the opposite, so it's x plus 1. Whenever you see a 0, you can just put that in as just an x, because x plus 0, x minus 0, that's not going to change anything. Positive 2 would be x minus 2. And then remember, anytime that there's a fraction, that the denominator comes out in front. So it would be 4x, and then it's the opposite, so minus 3, and then we just multiply all of this out. And that's what that should look like once you have that all multiplied out and simplified. And then that is it for 8b.